Okay, you can skip the part in your lab that says real brain, since I did not bring the real brain home with me, and most of those are parts you will see in class or some other time. Okay, so we're looking at the part 3, other brains, especially the 15-part model. So I'm going to mostly show these things in this 15-part model. This is this brain. Whoops. Which is 15 parts. It's a nice one to put together and take apart. Nice big brain. I'm going to pull out the cerebellum so they don't fall out again. And most of the frontal lobe here is gone, but you see most of the brain right here. Right here's the temporal lobe. Here's part of the frontal lobe, parietal lobe. Okay, here's the bottom. So the two hemispheres are just as always, right? Here's right hemisphere. Here's the left hemisphere. We're going to look at another brain a little bit. Here's one where you see, right, here's the brain, right? So the right hemisphere has been partly taken off, and here we have the left hemisphere. Okay, so those are the cerebral hemispheres. All right, next is the corpus callosum. So you learned that in this brain before as being right here, this shape. You learned that last week, this right here. Okay, so this right here. And I had said it looks like it's kind of a shape here, but this is really fibers that are running this way. They're connecting the right and left hemisphere. This is the biggest set. So like all this part is not connected, right? This is separate. This is separate. So the right and left hemisphere are really quite separate from each other, but this is connected. So this structure, right, as it looks here, has been cut in half this way, but it's fibers that are running transversely, kind of. Okay, so in this brain, you're actually going to be able to see right here, that's the front of the corpus callosum. I'll take off one of these cerebral hemispheres. I'll take off the right one. Okay, and here you can see, here is the corpus callosum showing on this brain. The idea is it's caking these two hemispheres. I'll take off both of these hemispheres here. And here you can see this right here is the corpus callosum, and it's running this back and forth kind of transversely between the hemisphere here, the two hemispheres that I just took off. So this whole structure right here is the corpus callosum, and we'll take that off. All right. Next, the big structures we're going to look at are the ventricles, and these are, you can kind of see them here. These are going to be the first and second ventricle are right here. I'm going to take the whole structure out in a minute. These are usually called the lateral ventricles. One is 1 and one is 2. All right, I'll pull this brain in half here. Now you can kind of see a little more. So now I've pulled off, we have the brain stem still here, the medulla and the pons and the midbrain, and then we have some other structures we're going to talk about, the thalamus in the middle and the corpus striatum. But this here, all the clear part are going to be the ventricles. So the ventricles are spaces in the brain, and they're filled with cerebral spinal fluid. All right, so here you can kind of see how they're looking in the brain, and I'm going to take this apart and just pull the ventricles right out. So this is kind of how they're sitting in the brain, right in the middle. And now I'll pull out the whole structure. And so here is what the ventricles look like. Okay. Hopefully you can see those pretty well. These are the lateral ones on top. There's some pictures in lecture that are pretty good, but you can see these big kind of horn-like shapes. Those are the lateral ventricles. And you have 3 horns on them. You have the anterior horn, so this is the front part of it, if you're looking in the brain. So both of these structures here, you're looking from a top view now. These parts here, This is the anterior horns, okay? Here's a bottom view. Then you come back, this is the posterior horn, so there's a little part that kind of comes down to the back. That's the posterior horn, all right? The posterior horn. Here, we'll do it sideways. Still, this is the posterior horn, all right? And then this part that comes down here, this is the inferior horn, all right? So you can see the inferior horn right here, all right? So we have anterior, posterior, and inferior horns, and those all make up, this is the lateral one ventricle and a second ventricle here. Then in the middle, right in here, which is a little bit harder to see, but right in here, I'll try to get closer. Yeah, you can see. This is the third ventricle. And what is around it is our one thalamus and another thalamus. This is kind of right in the middle of the brain. So this is, again, this is a space filled with cerebral spinal fluid. So you call this part the third ventricle. It's right in the middle of the brain. And you see it's very thin, right? If you're looking from the bottom, it's quite thin. If you look from the side, you can see it's this structure here, all right? And then this is the fourth ventricle down here. So here's the space, kind of opens up again. This is that Sylvian, so kind of the line going from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle is the Sylvian aqueduct, or the, what else is it called? Cerebral aqueduct, I think. And then this is the fourth ventricle down here. Here's the fourth ventricle, all right, from different angles, from the front. So it's this lower part. All right, yeah, it's the cerebral aqueduct or the Sylvian aqueduct. All right, then a couple more things I'll show you before we stop. So this was the part that was kind of around here, right here. We took out the brainstem, we took out kind of the middle. And